Okay, so I want to read you an Alshich. I'm going to read you an Alshich. And the very first pasuk in Parshas Betzorah, which you spoke about yesterday, so 2 days ago. I just want to read you one thing from the Alshich. It has very little to do with this. It says, Zos Tia, on page 620, it says, Zos Tia Torah Metzorah. So the Alshich was one of the great, one in Sfas with the Arizal and the Reb Chaim Vital and Shlomo Alkabetz, what we call the Kabbalah Club, up in Sfas in the 16th century, early 16th, 17th century. So the Alshich was a posek, and he's written one of the classic commentaries on the Parsha as well. The Arizal used to come to attend his Parsha shir. I don't know if that's as good as Torah anytime, but but it was the Arizal would attend his Parsha shir. So he says like this on this first pasuk, those tia Torahs are Mitzrayim. I wrote it down. I want you to hear the quote. He says, something that one caused to be written in the Torah brings, quote, Kedusha Gedola ad ein kates, tremendous Kedusha with no end, eternal Kedusha, derech shoresh nafsho, by the way of the source of his nefesh, his neshama. So people who have caused the section, because we find that, for example, Parshas Yisro was merited to Yisro because of his behavior. And then you have the section of the Benos Tzlavchot, who desired a portion of the land of Israel. So whatever that means, that somehow one way or another it was written and it got into the Torah by means of them. It would have been there anyway. These ideas would have been there anyway. But it got there by means of them. Therefore, they benefit eternally from what's written in the Torah. Because, I can't explain any more to you, just tell you what the Alshich says. But if he says it, it sounds good. That much we could say. It sounds good. So if you get something written in the Torah, you're doing good, Dovid. But I think it's a little too late now, but it's apparently a good thing. And the flip side is also true. The flip side is that something that's bad, like the one who cursed God's name, or Zimri, the man who was killed by Pinchas, if you get your name in the Torah for a bad reason, it's apparently not just your name is in the Torah. Your name is in the Torah. There's an eternal form of suffering there. Yeah, that's a woe. That's definitely a woe. That's a big woe. So the commentaries point out when it says Zos Torah HaMetzorah, that this is the man who has purified himself. He's actually getting a benefit from it being written in the Torah. That this Zos Torah HaMetzorah, that there's a benefit to the Metzorah because he himself has humbled himself and he's done tshuva in order to get to this point. So he's getting a benefit from our learning Parshas Betzorah. Anybody? I don't know which individual specifically it refers to. I don't know I don't know the extension of what the Alshich is saying. I have no idea. I can't. I don't know where. I don't know where it goes to or how far it goes. The point is, it goes somewhere. That's the point. It does go somewhere. That's what the Alshich says. Okay. So we were yesterday talking about the purification process. Now, go to Perek Yud Daled Pasuk Yud, which is on 622. So it says, Vayom HaShmini, on the 8th day, Yikach Shnei Kvosim Tevim, he takes 2 sheep, V'kavza Achas Bas Shnosa Tevim, and 1 sheeplet. I don't know what a female sheep is. What's a male sheep? A ram, and there's a ram and there's a ewe, but these are sheep. What is it? Male lambs, 2 unblemished male lambs, and 1
Mr. Sheep.
And Mrs. Sheep, right? Yeah, and a ewe. Yeah, he calls it a ewe. Yeah, EWE. The actual translates ewe. 2 male lambs, because they're not rams yet. They're young. They haven't gotten into ram state yet. In a female, which is he calls it a ewe, EWE. And then he brings a flour. And what does he do with them? One is going to be an asham, one is going to be an ola, and one is going to be a chatas. Okay, so there are three different animals are going to be for 3 different offerings. One is going to be a lamb, One is going to be an asham, an ola, and a chatas, which are the basic sacrifices that we make. An ola is a burnt offering. That's something you could donate. And we said that an ola corresponds to the thought process. That's when a person has inappropriate thoughts. He donates a korban ola. It's not required. It's not mandatory. Or neglecting a positive command. A chatas is when somebody has actually done something actively wrong. Then he's actually obligated to bring a korban chatas. And an asham is a guilt offering. Now, one of the commentaries, one of the great later commentaries from the early 20th century, the Shem Shmuel, who's one of the all-time classics, he says the following: why these three offerings? And what are these three offerings got to do? Maybe open that window over there while you're up. What have these three offerings got to do as an atonement of sorts for the person who is a Matzorah, who obviously became one way or another Lashon Hara was involved? So that brings us to another astonishing statement that really needs to be understood. There's a Gemara that says, a person who speaks Lashon Hara, Magdil Avonos. The word Magdil is tricky to translate. Magdil probably means he magnifies, but in our context means he activates. Magdil Avonos, a person who speaks Lashon Hara, activates Averas, parallel to Kineged Avodah Zarah Gilurayis Shichus Damim, which is a pretty shocking statement, because if you speak Lashon Hara for idol worship, immorality, and murder, if a guy pulls a gun on you and says worship idols, you have to give up your life. If a guy pulls a gun on you and says, okay, tell me something negative about Yoel over here, my reaction, well, you want private life, business life, what would you like to know? Sing like a canary, right? They're going to have to give up your life not to speak Lashon Hara. So how can it be that if you speak Lashon Hara, the Gemara says, you activate Averas parallel to idol worship, immorality, and murder? That's a big problem. It doesn't say it about tzitzis, doesn't say it about a pork, doesn't say it about any other Averas. Speaking Lashon Hara, idol worship, immorality, murder. What's the connection? So the Chafetz Chaim explains like this, a very interesting concept. It's not an interesting concept, we need to know the concept. Anytime you do a mitzvah, you create some sort of, call it a good angel, an advocate for yourself, so to speak, a spiritual advocate. And anytime we do an Avera, we create a negative angel, a prosecutor. Then when a person dies, they go up there, and on the day of judgment, they come out. The good angels and the bad angels, they get on the scale. And you just hope that the scale goes down in the direction of the bad angel. That's what the simple explanation is. Now, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu works, HaKadosh Baruch Hu works in Mida Keneged Mida. It goes quid pro quo. You get what you deserve. In theory, and this is probably in theory only, a person, let's say, transgresses idol worship, immorality, and murder. So he's created some seriously bad angels. But he learns his 2 halachas a day of Chafetz Chaim, and he never talks Lashon Hara. That means he kills the guy, says, I don't want to say anything bad about you, but boom, and then he blows him away. And then somebody says to him, that guy you killed, why did you kill him? I don't want to say. Right? So that married woman you were involved with, you didn't like her husband? Come on, Chafetz Chaim says you can't say that, So all right, so it seems a bit far-fetched, right? Okay, but in theory, if the person would be meticulously careful not to speak his mouth, so he's created these angels, but these angels have a piece of tape across their mouth. They can't prosecute him. The prosecuting angels cannot prosecute, whether it's prosecution during his lifetime, whether it's after his life, they can't prosecute, because he is not a prosecutor. He doesn't prosecute the Jewish people. You understand? Says the Gemara, when a person takes the tape off his mouth, if a person starts speaking Lashon Hara, you've now energized these Averas. Now they can prosecute you. Now you've energized them. So when a person speaks Lashon Hara, it's not just the Lashon Hara that he speaks. Now there's going to be some sort of effect as a result of his Lashon Hara. Not only that, there's a pasuk that says, there's a pasuk in Amos, in the prophet Amos. And the pasuk says, Ki hine yotzer harim uvori ruach, God creates the mountains and he creates the wind. Umagi le'odam masecho. And God will also tell a person what he's going to speak. That means in the Gemara, this is all from the Gemara. The Gemara says at the end of a person's lifetime, when a person goes up there, we're accountable for all of our actions. Every single word we've ever spoken in our life is going to be played back for us. Even the most private things said under the most private circumstances are going to be played back. So the Chafetz Chaim, when they introduced the phonograph or some sort of recording machine, the first time the Chafetz Chaim says all these machines that technology has discovered, that's a way of us understanding. When the Torah says in Pirkei Avos, ayin roa, there's an eye that sees you. Oh, come on, what kind of eye sees you? Oh, which eye is watching me? Nowadays, oh, which eye isn't watching you? Can't park your car without 6 cameras on you. Right? There's cameras everywhere. Ayin roa, the ozen shomas, there's an ear that hears. What? Somebody, my words went out. Who heard it? You know, kind of trouble people have gotten for recordings that have been found and played and so on and so forth. So the pasuk says that God creates the mountains. Ki hine yotzaram ubori ruach, he creates the mountains and he creates the wind, and he will eventually tell a person every word that he's ever said. The question is, what's the beginning of the pasuk got to do with the end of the pasuk? God created the mountain and created the wind, and he will tell a person what he said. What's one thing got to do with the other? What's the beginning of this pasuk in Amos got to do with the end of the pasuk? Created the mountain and the wind, and he'll eventually tell everybody, every word the person said will be revealed. What's the connection? What's the connection? Beginning pasuk to the end of the pasuk. Wind, mountains, okay, nice. He'll tell everybody what they. Why? What's something got to do with the other? So there's a Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai says, you know why there are mountains? There are mountains. Mountains block the wind. Mountains block the wind. You need mountains to block wind. That's why it's always the flat plain areas like Kansas that get hit by tornadoes. There are no mountains in Kansas. You get hit by tornadoes. Always some sort of trailer park also. I don't know. These guys are down and out anyway, but somehow they always get tagged in the tornadoes, the people in the trailer parks. Okay? So you got the mountains to block the wind, which then begs another question. What do you need the wind for? What do you need the wind for? Okay? So the wind blows to show us what our mouth could do. That's a connection at the beginning of the pasuk to the end of the pasuk. That the wind blows, and then there are mountains that are created to help block the wind. And then the pasuk continues and says, but a person's words are going to be repeated to him. What's the connection? The connection is, imagine the wind without the mountains blocking them. So you see the destruction. You see what happens. You see what happens. Towns are wiped out. So the Rabbi Chaim, I think it's Rabbi Chaim Volozhin, the disciple of the Vilna Gaon, he says, that's what a person thinks. You think when you spoke Lashon Hara, you just spoke a word. You just said a word. You just said something. Do you know the effects that you're having? We have no idea the effects. The destruction that we could leave in our wake is no different than the destruction of a tornado that wipes out a city in southern Missouri. It's always Missouri, isn't it? It's like somehow Missouri always gets tagged. I don't know. I wouldn't live in Missouri. Go live somewhere else. Go live in Afghanistan. Don't live in Missouri. Missouri's a bad place to live. There's always tornadoes in Missouri and in Kansas. So we used to get tornado watches in Chicago. We get a tornado watch. Never had a tornado. Every once in a while they say there's a tornado watch. A tornado watch means it was about 150 miles from Chicago there was a tornado. It never came near us in Chicago. Yeah, we had other issues. We had snow and ice, but we never had a tornado. Never had a tornado in Chicago. So the what do you call it? The Torah is telling you, look at the effects of your words. The effects of your words down here, and the effect of your words up there that you could actually activate. A person is not only hurting other people with Lashon Hara, hurting himself. He could actually activate averas that I've done, which would lie dormant if I was careful with my mouth. Those averas are now activated. That's what Reb Chaim Volozhin says. I knew a guy, a very good friend of mine. He's a very big, he's a big Talmid Chacham, and he's a real tzaddik. This guy's a guy who's almost totally selfless. One of the most selfless individuals I've ever met in my life. And he told me he was learning in Kolo when he was young. He was learning in Kolo. There was another guy in the Kolo who was a Baal Tshuva. And one of the Zman ended, and each Zman, you have to arrange for chavrusas in the Kolo. So he went over to somebody to do this guy a favor, he went to one of the other Avrechim in the Kollel, and he said, maybe you'll learn with Ruvain next Zman. Maybe you learn Ruvain needs a Chavrusa next time. Maybe you learn with Ruvain. He's a Baal Tshuva, but he learns very well. He's been in the Kollel for a couple of years. The guy said, okay. So he goes over to Ruvain. He said, listen, I told him that maybe he agreed to, Shimon agreed to learn with you. I told him you're a Baal Tshuva, but that you learn very well. I said, you told him I'm a Baal Tshuva? He goes, yeah. He goes, you know what? I've been in the Kollel 2 years. I didn't want anybody to know I'm a Baal Tshuva. Now you told him I'm leaving the Kollel. He left the Kollel because of that. My friend, to this day, he has regret. And he wasn't even trying to hurt him. He wasn't trying to he wasn't trying to hurt him. All he was doing was trying to help him. See, sometimes you could say something, and one word could ruin a person. It could break up a shidduch. There are a million one things you could do. You could ruin a person's business. One word is all it takes. One word is all it takes. That's what the Torah is telling you. So now you bring these three korbanos: an asham, a chatas, and a shlamim, and an ola, an asham. What's that got to do with the three big averas? So the Al Sheikh HaKadosh says that the ola corresponds to idol worship, because it is theoretically possible for a person to either worship idol, to either have heretical thoughts in his mind. Remember, the korban ola corresponds to the mind, or a person may actually bow down to idols, but in his mind he's not accepting it as an idol. That's certainly a lesser level. Whatever it is, the ola corresponds to the idol worship that may have been activated by a person's avodah zarah. Number one. Number two is the chatas, which obviously is the sin offering for action, which atones for the immorality that now could be activated by this person's lashon hara. And the asham is for murder, because the asham is a combination. The asham is sprinkled, the blood of the asham is sprinkled like a korban ola, but it's eaten like a korban chatas. The korban ola, in other words, the asham has characteristics like the ola and characteristics like the chatas. It's somewhere in between. The person who kills has created a separation between the body and the soul of the person that he's killed. And therefore, according to the Yishem Yishvol, each one of these korbanos corresponds to one of those averas that he's activated because of his lashon. You see, nothing in the Torah happens to be there. And there's a reason, there's a method for this madness. There's a reason even the korbanos that guy brings, there's a reason why he's bringing them. Okay. Then in Pasuk, take a look at Pasuk Yud Aleph. Okay. In Pasuk, it's 3 lines from the top. I want to show you something fascinating. It says, "Ve'amida kohen amitayr sa'isha mitahir ve'osam lifnei Hashem pesach omei." The kohen, he has the man stand. How's the article translate in the form? He shall place him. Oh, okay, that's a good word. He places the person who's becoming purified. 3 lines on the top on 622. And these korbanos before Hashem at the entrance of Oil Moed. Now take a look at Rashi, 3rd line from the top on the right column. Rashi says, is this? Bishar Nicanor. In the gate, there's a gate called Nicanor. V'lo ba'azara atzma, l'shifishu mechusar kippurim. Not in the azara itself, because he hasn't had his full atonement, so he can't enter into the sanctuary, but he stands in Shar Nicanor. Do any of you know anything about Nicanor? Shlomo Yitzchak, can I trouble you to open this window over here?
Sure. Well, this window?
Yeah, to the right, all the way to the right. No, you can step on the chair. Go to the right. Look to your right. 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 Yeah, they pull it from there. Yeah. Push the button. There's a button. The latch over there.
Okay, I should step.
Yeah. Let's see. Push the button. Okay, great. Thank you.
Wow, now it's a different story.
See, how do you like that?
Wow. What's missing here?
Look here comes the tornado now. Here comes the tornado. See, okay, so there's an interesting story in the Gemara. There's a man named Nicanor. And Nicanor went to Alexandria to buy a couple of doors for the Beis Hamikdash. These were copper doors that he went. On the boat, on the way back, you're familiar with the story? On the boat, on the way back to Eretz Yisrael, it's a Gemara in Yuma. On the boat, on the way back to Eretz Yisrael, there was a storm at sea. So they have to, in the old days when there was a storm and the boats were shaking, you had to unload the boat. You had to toss things over. So they tossed over one of his doors into the water. And he was very upset about it because this is a door that he was purchasing for the Beis HaMikdash. And then they said, okay, you have to toss over the other door. So he grabbed the other door. He said, you toss this door. He wrapped himself around the door. He said, if you throw the door, you're going to throw me with it. I'm not giving up this door. And so they didn't end up throwing the door in the water. And then the sea calmed down. They pulled into the port. And the second door, miraculously, that they had thrown under the water, the second door was there underneath the ship. It was bouncing around under the ship. It had traveled with the ship, the second door. So they took these two doors, they made a gate in the Beis HaMikdash, which are normally made out of a different material. They call these gates Shar Nicanor. In honor of this man's Mesiras Nefesh, how he sacrificed in order to bring these doors. So they brought these doors to the Beis HaMikdash. They brought the doors to the Beis HaMikdash and they made it a Shar Nicanor. That's Ad Kan HaGemara. That's what the Gemara says. I didn't see any of the commentaries mention this. This is my own idea. You're free to accept or reject. But it could very well be, why is this guy placed by the gates of Nicanor? This guy, there are other gates in the Beis HaMikdash. Why is this process done, the purification of the Metzora, why is it done at the gates of Nicanor? So it could very well be that a door obviously symbolizes a mouth, because the door is the opening. The door is the opening of a mouth. And Nicanor did two things. Number one, he demonstrated Mesiras Nefesh, that he's willing to go the extra mile for the door, to really go, at great personal cost. And the lesson to the Metzora may very well be that when it comes to your door, sometimes you have to sacrifice not to open the door. The Chafetz Chaim says there's a halacha that, let's say you're working in a job where people talk Lashon Hara around you. And they won't think much if you're not one of the boys and you don't participate. People think you're an outcast, and then you could even lose your job because you're not socially, the office, the office atmosphere. There's a word for it that they use, the office, the feel in the office, the spirit of the office. If you don't, if you don't, you could lose your job. The halacha is you have to give up, you can't speak Lashon Hara. So a guy holds a gun to your head. If a guy holds a gun to your head and says, speak Lashon Hara, or I take all your money. Not your life. If a guy holds a gun to your head and says, speak Lashon Hara, tell me one sentence about Matt of Lashon Hara, or I'll take all your money. You have to give up all your money. It doesn't even have to be massive, drastic. All you have to say is, Matt has messy handwriting. And that's good Lashon Hara, la mahadrin mina mahadrin. Right? I'm not allowed to say it. I can't say it. I have to give up all my money. I guess I'll take away all your money unless you tell me something bad about me. Not allowed to say it.
Handwriting is terrible. Can I say this? No.
What's that?
Can I say about myself?
No.
No.
Even the Chafetz Chaim was asked if a person is allowed to speak Lashon Hara about himself. Mm-hmm. The Chafetz Chaim was asked, can you speak Lashon Hara about yourself? That's almost like the great philosophical question, is Lashon Hara in the woods considered Lashon Hara? Right. So Chafetz Chaim, there is a story. I don't know if it's certainly been repeated many times, but whether or not we could rely on it for the halacha. The story they tell about the Chafetz Chaim, he was once on his way to a town and he was with a wagon driver. And the wagon driver turned to him and he said, you know who's coming to our town today? The great Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim says that he's not all he's cracked up to be. Trust me, he's not. No, he's unbelievable. He's the Gadol Hador. He says, no, that is such an exaggeration. I know the man well. It is not. He didn't know it was the Chafetz Chaim in the wagon. He says, I know the man well. It is not. I'm telling you, it's not what people think. He says, yes, it is. And he says, no, I'm telling you, it is. And eventually the guy smacked him for being a chutzaf. He smacked the Chafetz Chaim for disparaging the Chafetz Chaim. So the Chafetz Chaim, apparently based on that, the Chafetz Chaim said, you see that you're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara about yourself. At a minimum, you shouldn't speak Lashon Hara about it. One thing is for sure, I just learned this halacha yesterday, you're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara about someone else even if you include yourself. Mm-hmm. That you're not allowed to do, and even if you place yourself first. So I could say, yeah, me and Matt last night, we just got so ripped last night. You want to talk about yourself? Maybe you could. Him, who gave, because you're a criminal doesn't mean you can say somebody else is a criminal. So there's that you're not allowed to. So I'm not sure about. The point is, that number one, sometimes it's hard. You have to be moser nefesh not to speak lashon hara. I know I have a friend of mine. This guy is really. I mean, talk about a man of principle. This guy is a man of principle in many ways, and he actually got into a car with some yeshiva guys. He got into a car. He hitched a ride, and he was driving somewhere on a highway somewhere, and these guys started talking about the internal Haredi politics. And he said, please, I really don't want to hear any lashon hara. And they started saying, no, it's not lashon hara, the usual defense. No, it's not lashon hara, which means it is. No, it's not lashon hara. And he said, no, I really don't want to hear it. And they continued. He said, please stop the car. Stop the car. And he got out of the car. He got out of the car in the middle of the highway. He got out of the car because the guy was talking lashon hara. I'm not willing to hear it. That takes a certain amount of mesiras nefesh. I mean, when you stop and think about it, what would you do if they were distributing pork in the car? Everybody have some pork. And not only I wouldn't eat the pork, I wouldn't eat the pork for sure. I wouldn't sit in a car with a bunch of people who are eating pork. And that I can't, that has nothing to do with me. And here they're talking lashon hara, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear the lashon hara. I'm in a cesspool. He stopped the car and he got out. So I think lesson number one is that there's an aspect of mesiras nefesh that we're learning from Nicanor. And that's why they put him in the gates of Nicanor. Sometimes it's hard. I think lesson number two is here they were all telling him to, what do you call it? They were telling him, throw the door over. He said, no, I'm not going to throw the door over. And he stood up to peer pressure. And that often happens. You could be sitting in a group of people, you're sitting at a Shabbos table, and people say, come on, tell us it's not so bad. It's and you got to stand up to the peer pressure. We're on page 622. You have to stand up to the peer pressure. And it's not easy. So it could be that that's what the Torah is alluding to here. What do you say, Matt? Okay. Now, take a look at Pasuk Yud Daled. It's 8 lines from the top. V'lakach hakohen midam ha'asham, v'nasan hakohen al tznuch ozen hamitahera yamanis. The kohen puts on the right ear of the person who's being purified. How does he translate the tznuch? Because Rashi says the middle part of the ear. So I'm under the impression that it's this little middle part that sticks into the ear. Right. So I'm under the impression that it's this part over here. He puts on the middle part of the ear. V'albohen yodo hayamanis, on the right thumb. V'albohen raglo hayamanis, on his right foot. And then the kohen takes the oil, and with the oil, he does the same thing. He sprinkles 7 times, and then with the remaining part of the oil, he puts it on the feet, on the hands, again on the ear, on the hand, and on the feet, and the rest of the oil he pours on the guy's head. Whatever's left. So you have the procedure involves 2 things. It involves blood. He takes blood, sprinkles some of the blood here, and some of the blood here, and some of the blood on the big thumb, big toe, right toe. Then he takes the oil. He sprinkles the oil 7 times, and then he takes oil, puts again on the ear, on the thumb, and on the toe, and then he takes the rest of the oil and he pours it, whatever left over, pours it on the guy's hair, on the Mitzvah's hair. So what's going on here? What's going on? What's with this rather strange procedure? So one of the ideas here is that the Gemara asks, why are our fingers shaped like spades? A spade gets narrower towards the bottom. And on an adult finger, it's not quite as prominent. But when you look at a baby's fingers, the baby's fingers almost look like a triangle. They're very thick at the base and they narrow down. Till by an adult, it's more or less the same. But by a baby, the fingers are very much triangular. They're very fat right at the base and they get narrow. And so the Gemara in Ksubah says, and the Gemara also asks, why do we have a lobe? Right? Why do we have a lobe by our ear? So Gemara gives to it. Gemara says the fingers are shaped like spades, so that if you hear lashon hara, you can put your fingers in your ears. Or it says you have a lobe, then if you hear lashon hara, you put your lobe over your ear. So the Gemara says. Okay. So somebody once said to me, wouldn't that be offensive to people? If you're sitting at a table and people are talking lashon hara, you put your fingers in your ears, wouldn't that be offensive? And the answer is absolutely. That's exactly what we're trying to do. If they didn't get the hint some other way when you tried changing the conversation or changing the course, well, if you put your fingers in here, most people understand what you're doing. And if you do like this, most people understand. Most people get it. So well, I found the most diplomatic way. You see what happens is people get for some reason, if you say to somebody, I think that's not kosher, I don't know if that food has a hechsher. I don't know if that food has a hechsher. Most people say to you, oh, really? Oh, I didn't. They start looking at the bag. Oh, wow, I didn't notice. It doesn't have an OE. And oh. When you tell somebody, and I think that might be Lashon Hara. No, it's not. I'm telling you, it's for a benefit. There are people always get very, it's for a beneficial reason. Anyway, he's a Russia. And they got all the excuses in the world why it's allowed. I found the best way when somebody's speaking something that's really inappropriate, and I really don't want to hear it, and if I'm in a zone, it goes back and forth, but if I'm in my be careful type zone, so say to the person, listen, I've been a little careless with my mouth lately, I'm trying to just avoid hearing it. Blame yourself. Blame yourself. Everybody's willing to blame you. I've been very careless with my mouth lately. I'd really rather not talk about people. Yeah?
You are supposed to, though, if you're going to do a business thing with someone or something like that, you're supposed to call around and ask about their...
Absolutely. And with the shidduch, the same thing. Because there's what's called litoelis. Litoelis is for beneficial purpose. But a beneficial purpose, and then it's not Lashon Hara. It's for a beneficial purpose. So you're asking me about... You're asking me about going into business with him. And I said, well, I know this guy. The last 3 partners that he's have all taken him to court claiming they've been swindled. Now, you want to get involved with a guy like that or you don't, right? Now, but there are rules, the Chafetz Chaim says. Number 1, I have to know it as a personal fact. I'm not allowed to exaggerate. It's not allowed to be because anyway I got it in for this guy for somebody to say, oh good, now's my chance to farshmutz him and that sort of thing. But I did hear somebody, and this always comes up in shidduchim when you're trying to check people out in shidduchim, is like, and people all of a sudden they start to clam up. So I heard one of the big, a very big Talmud Chacham once said, it's very ironic. The things that people shouldn't say when they're not supposed to talk, then people have no problem talking. And when it comes to shidduchim, where people's lives are in your hand, all of a sudden everybody clams up. Where you should be saying, all of a sudden that people don't say. If you ask me about a certain guy, is this guy honest? I'll tell you, he's got other qualities, but honestly, I've seen signs of shadiness and sneakiness about this guy. I'm obligated to tell you. I'm obligated to tell you. A guy calls up, he wants to find out about a certain yeshiva boy for his daughter. Is this a boy who makes it to minyan? Yeah, not bad. And he never shows up to minyan. You know what happens as a result of this? They get married. The guy still doesn't go to minyan. And the girl's getting upset. Hey, I married a guy who's supposed to be going to minyan. What's going on here? And these things could spiral out of control to the point that they get divorced. Now, whose fault was it? I've seen it happen. Whose fault was it? You, because you didn't say what you should have said. So you have to know the rules. There are rules here about what you have to say, what doesn't have to say, how much you have to say. That's why people call me up about shidduchim. They tell me about this boy. I get called all the time. People go up and tell me about this boy. Do you know this boy? Yeah. What can you tell me about him? My response is, he's a wonderful boy. What would you like to know? I'm not going to start talking. What am I going to say? Well, he's got messy handwriting. I don't know if they care. And I'm even going to say he's not very conscientious about minyan because they might not care about that either. So if it's something that I know is what the Chafetz Chaim says is an objective flaw, he spent time in prison for beating his first wife. That's something a prospective father-in-law probably wants to know and probably has to know. But I don't know what he's interested in. The guy may say, does he have a good voice? Oh yeah, wonderful voice. Great, that's the boy for us. I don't know, maybe he's looking for a chazan as a son-in-law. I don't know what he wants. So I always tell people, ask direct questions. Does he make it to minyan? Yeah. How often? Does he get there 70% of the time? Give a number, as direct as you can. Then the person has to give you a response. They have to give you an answer. But yes, for a business, you check it out. So the halacha says on the one hand, you're not allowed to believe it. On the other hand, you're allowed to take action on it. The meichashiba, you could be suspicious, you could suspect it enough that you don't have to take action. And that's a very hard thing. You asked an excellent question about what if you hear somebody says Lashon Hara. The halacha is you have to try to get yourself to not believe it. And it's unfortunate because in our day and age, with social media, people get farshmutzed all the time. People just you go in front of millions of people. And once it's out there, it's very difficult to pull it back. Could you imagine somebody? All I got to do is send out a what's it called when everybody sees it? I forgot. I don't know what's it called. An email, a text. All I got to do is say, Obama was not suspected of embezzlement. Oh, what? That was not suspected as a stealing. You know, the fact that I said he wasn't suspected, I was like, why was there? What was he was innocent of embezzlement? Was there an embezzlement? No, I never heard any embezzlement charges against him. But it's out there. That's the problem. It's very difficult. Everybody thinks where there's smoke, there's fire. Experience shows that it's not. I was just told. This happened to me last week, 2 weeks ago. There was a wedding. They had the chassid was on a table. The groom dances on a table sometimes. It was an older girl. The girl was 34 years old, getting married. Finally found the chassid. The chassid was an older guy who was on the table. They're dancing around. He fell off the table in the middle of the chasna, and he hit his head on the floor. And they had to take him. He was unconscious. They had to take him to the hospital. And then somebody told me a couple of days later, unfortunately, he didn't make it.
What do you mean?
He died.
He
died.
Oh my God.
A week later, somebody says, "Oh, by the way, the chassid woke up." And so he told me he died. Yeah, that's what somebody said. He died. He didn't die. He woke up. He's okay now. He recognized the kala. He's going to be okay. Yeah, and this wasn't even lashon hara. This is just a regular report. Like, I don't know, a couple. Mark Twain. There were once rumors that somebody once spread a rumor that Mark Twain had died, and Mark Twain said, "The rumors of my demise are grossly exaggerated." So you can't. You've seen life experience that there could be absolutely nothing to it. But yes, absolutely, you have to check for it. So there are three things. Number one, the ear. You sprinkle on the ear because obviously a person has to learn. You should be listening to lashon hara. Number two, on the finger, as an allusion to the idea that when you do hear lashon hara, that you should plug your ears up. And number three, on the toe, at the feet, that if you're in a situation where you're hearing lashon hara, well, get up and move. Walk away. Leave. Run if you have to. Just walk away. Get out of the car in the middle of the highway if you have to. That's the idea of the sprinkler. Somebody else suggested that whenever the Kohen is obviously trying to communicate an approach here. So in anything that we learn in life, there are three stages. And my brother-in-law told me this is a very interesting idea. Number one, we have to hear it. That's the ear. You're telling me to correct myself. I have to hear what you're saying, number one. Number two, the hand. I have to take action. And number three, the regel. Now, the word regel is related to the Hebrew word hergel. What does hergel mean? Anybody know what hergel means? Habit. Hergel is habit. Lehit ragel is to get used to something, to make something into a habit. We have to take the lashon hara. We have to, number one, any lesson in life, we have to hear it, we have to take action on it, and we have to take action on it enough to the point that we turn it into a hergel, that we turn it into a habit. And that applies not only to the lessons of lashon hara, but applies to all areas of life. Okay.